Hi everyone, my name's Matt, and today we're going to be building and testing out a $1,000 gaming PC to see what kind of a system we can get for that price in today's crazy market. And for $940 or around $1,000 after tax, you are able to get a system that can play a ton of games at 1440p with 60 plus FPS. Now you might be able to get a little more performance going for a different configuration, but I went for parts that are high quality, reliable, give you a good base to upgrade from, and should last you for years to come. So let's get started with the build. At this price point, I think it makes the most sense to go for a CPU on the AM5 platform, as Intel doesn't have many compelling offerings right now, and unless you're on a tight budget, it doesn't make too much sense to go AM4. With the Ryzen 5 7600 at almost $200 right now, I decided to just pick up the Ryzen 5 9600X, which comes in at about $210, and currently on Newegg it includes a free 16GB RAM kit, which we won't be using for this build but could be sold to recoup some of the cost. The 9600X has 6 cores, 12 threads, and is able to boost up to an impressive 5.4 GHz. For gaming, unless you're building a high-end system, this is all you really need. Also, this chip does have basic integrated graphics, which while not necessary, might come in handy in the future for troubleshooting or running your system temporarily without a graphics card. This 9600X is going to be installed in the ASRock B650M ProRS Wi-Fi. For $130, this board is providing a ton of features for the money. It's got 4 DIMM slots, 3 M.2 slots, built-in Wi-Fi, VRMs that can handle a 16-core Ryzen chip, and an overall nice aesthetic in my opinion. The back panel I/O is also solid with 8 USB ports, a BIOS flashback button, and a built-in I/O shield. Plus, if you buy this with the 9600X on Newegg right now, you get an additional $20 off. With the board out and resting on its box, we can focus our attention to the CPU socket and get our Ryzen CPU ready for installation. We'll start by pressing down and out on the CPU retention arm, lifting it up fully, then we can hinge up the socket cover to reveal all the delicate socket pins. Handling the CPU only by the edges, we can bring it over and line the marked corner on it with the marked corner on the board. Here's a closer look, and gently lower it into place, applying no pressure. Once in, the socket cover can be lowered down and the retention arm secured under the clip like this. The plastic socket protector can be lifted away, and with that our CPU is installed, so the next thing to do is install our cooler. To cool the Ryzen 5 9600X, I went for the very usual suspect of this Thermalright Assassin X120. It's $17 or $18, offering a good sized heatsink with plenty of copper heat pipes and a high quality 120mm fan to effectively dissipate the heat. This isn't a very exciting option, but it cools our CPU very well for the money and doesn't look half bad either in my opinion. To install this, we'll start by removing the 4 screws and 2 plastic mounting pieces above and below the CPU socket right here and set them to the side. Next, we can take the 4 AMD posts from the cooler box and place them over each of the standoffs like this. Then the first mounting bracket can be held in place while the 2 screws are secured into place, and the same process is just repeated for the other bracket like this. Now a pea-sized amount of the included thermal paste can be squeezed onto the CPU IHS. The cooler is then lowered down like this, lining up the screws on it with the posts on the mounting brackets. Then these can be screwed in, going back and forth until both are fully tightened down. The fan mounting wires are placed on the fan like this, then one at a time they're stretched over the fins on one side and then on the other. Finally, the CPU fan cable can be plugged in here, and the excess wire can be tucked away to neaten things up a bit, and with that, the CPU cooler is successfully installed. Next, we'll grab out our memory, which in this case is 32 gigs of the silicon-powered DDR5 memory at 6000 MHz CL36, coming in at about $80. 32 gigabytes is plenty for modern gaming, and these speeds and timings are very solid in terms of price to performance. This is a 2-stick kit, so it will operate in dual channel mode, and installing it is super simple. Bringing our attention to the 4 RAM slots, we'll be installing our sticks into slots 2 and 4, which are these ones here. We'll start by opening the clip on both of these slots, then the first stick can be brought over, lining the cutout in it with the notch in the slot and lowered into place. Once lowered down, it can be pressed in until it's fully seated and the slot clip snaps shut. Then this process is just repeated for the second stick of memory. With that done, our memory is installed and we can move on to our SSD. For this build, I decided to go with a 1TB Kingston NV3 NVMe SSD. This is a solid budget Gen 4 drive coming in at a little over $60. It's offering plenty of performance for a gaming system like this one, and 1TB should be enough for your OS, applications, and a good number of your most played games. Now, if you have a little extra in your budget, going for a 2TB drive out of the gate wouldn't be the worst idea, but again, for most people, 1TB should be enough. Also, with 2 extra M.2 slots on our motherboard, it means upgrading to more fast storage in the future should only take a couple of minutes. We're going to be installing this drive into the top slot, which we will access by loosening the 2 screws on the heatsink with a smaller Phillips head screwdriver. The heatsink can now be lifted up, and this is also a good time to remove the plastic cover sheet on the heatsink thermal pad. Next, the drive can be brought over, and the cutout in it can be lined up with the notch in the slot. It's inserted at an angle like this. The heatsink can be brought over, and I like to line up the first screw on it like this, then hinge it and the SSD down at the same time, then both screws can be tightened back down. With that, the motherboard can be set to the side and we can get out our case box, open it up, and getting out the case itself. In this instance, I went for the Okinos Aqua 3. I got the all black version for about $60, but you can also get the RGB version for about $5 more if that's more your thing. This case is pretty awesome for the money as it has a fish tank style design, 3 included fans, great front panel I/O, and plenty of mesh filters. We can start on this by removing the 2 glass side panel thumb screws, pulling back on the panel, hinging it out, and lifting it away. Then the front glass panel can be hinged forward, which does take a little bit of force and can be lifted away. Next, the 2 thumb screws on the back panel can be removed, the panel pulled back, and then again lifted away. Now we can undo the top cable bundle, undo the bottom cable bundle, and pull out this box which contains all the screws necessary for installing our parts. With that done, the case can be set on its side like this so we can prep it for the motherboard. Before we install the motherboard, we have to install 2 standoffs from the screw bag in these 2 holes here, and move this standoff down here. So we'll start by installing the 2 new ones with either a nut driver or a pair of pliers, then the other standoff can be unscrewed and then secured in the hole just beneath it. Then we can remove the top 2 PCIe cover pieces by bending them back and forth one at a time until they snap off and can be lifted away. Now we can grab our motherboard, handling it by the cooler, and insert it into the case at an angle like this, lining up the I/O with the I/O cutout and hinging it down into place, making sure the standoffs are visible beneath the motherboard holes. Then we can grab 8 motherboard screws that look like this and install one into each of the motherboard holes with a standoff beneath it. An order here doesn't matter. With the motherboard installed, we can lift the case back onto its feet and grab out our power supply. To power this system, I went with the MSI Mag A650BN. This is a high quality 650 watt 80 plus bronze rated unit that is non-modular but has all black sleeve cables. 650 watts is more than enough for this system and even gives you enough headroom for some future upgrades. To install this, we'll take it with the fan facing down and insert it into the back of the case like this. Then we can take 4 of these power supply screws and install one into each of the 4 holes like this. And now we can start routing cables. The 8-pin CPU cable goes through this hole here. The large 24-pin cable and front panel USB-C cable go through this hole over here. Then the PCIe power cable, USB 3 cable, tiny front panel cables, and the case fan cable can all go through this hole right here. Finally, the front panel audio cable can go through this hole right here, and the 2 leftover cables can be tucked into the power supply basement like this. Then we can set the case onto its side and plug everything in. We'll start with the front panel USB-C cable, which is plugged in right here. Then just above it, we can grab and plug in the big 24-pin cable like this, making sure the clip snaps over the bump out on the header. Then in the top left corner, we can grab the 8-pin CPU cable and plug it in, which is hard to see here, so here's another angle of what that should look like. Then we'll plug in all the cables at the bottom, starting with the tiny front panel ones here, then the USB cable next to those, then the CPU fan cable next to that, and finally the HD audio cable in the far corner. With that all done, it's time to install the final component, which is the graphics card. Now, the GPU market is kind of crazy right now, but you're still able to get a decent card in this budget. For around $300, you can get an Intel Arc B580. I just recommend getting the cheapest one you can find, which when I was parting this out was this model from Gunnier. This is an all black dual fan model that looks really nice in my opinion and fits the mostly black no RGB theme of this build. The Intel Arc B580 is a very solid 1440p graphics card with 12 gigs of video memory. It's supposed to only cost $250, but $300 is still decent for the performance you're getting. Also, any other card at this price point is going to only have 8 gigs of video memory, so this card should be more equipped for the future than something like a 5060. With that being said, if the new 16GB 9060 XT is actually available at the alleged $350 MSRP, I would probably recommend getting that instead, but I'm doubtful it will be that price anytime soon. To prep this case for this card, we first have to loosen, lift up, and then tighten back down this sliding cover at the back. Then with the PCIe power cable out of the way and with the PCIe lock on the top slot open, we can bring our card over, line it up, lower it down, and press it into place until it's secure and the PCIe lock snaps shut. Then we can take our 8-pin PCIe power cable and line it up with the header on the card and press it into place. Then finally, we can slide the PCIe cover back down and secure the card in place with 2 of the power supply style screws. With that done, all that was left to do was cable manage the system for a couple minutes, throw the back panel back on, reinstall the front panel, and then reinstall the glass side panel, and now the build is complete. For around $940 before tax, I think this system is a pretty good value for the price. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking I should have gone for a 7500F to save another $50ish, but with the $20 bundle discount and free RAM kit on Newegg, the 9600X seemed worth it to me. But the real question is, how does it perform? Well, let's find out. I tested a mix of games all at 1440p to see what kind of performance this $1,000-ish PC was offering. Starting off with Valorant, just to show a basic esports title, at 1440p high settings, the system's pretty overkill, providing an average FPS in the upper 500s and 1% lows of around 300, which shows for the super easy to run esports game, this system will work great for competitive play. Moving on to Fortnite, I tested this game at 1440p in performance mode with epic view distance and high textures. The average FPS was solid at around 300, but the 1% lows were much lower, which is to be expected as this is common with Fortnite, especially after only a few games played, and will likely improve as the full shader cache is built. Next up is Marvel Rivals, which I tested at 1440p medium settings and at 100% resolution scale. Doing this resulted in a decent 63 FPS with 1% lows of 47. This was fine performance, and you could definitely enable upscaling if you're wanting higher FPS for competitive play. In Minecraft, I tested at 1440p using the default settings on screen now, while also using Iris and BLS shaders. I just loaded into a new world and ran around for a bit. Doing this resulted in a 98 FPS average with 1% lows of 48, which is solid performance in my opinion, and shows that Minecraft with shaders on this PC is totally playable at 1440p. Next up is Cyberpunk 2077, which I tested at 1440p using the high preset and the built-in benchmark. Doing this resulted in a 100 FPS average with 1% lows of 74, which is great performance in my opinion. The next title is Black Ops 6, which I tested at 1440p using the balanced preset and the built-in benchmark. Running this resulted in a 91 FPS average with 1% lows of 52, which is plenty of performance for casual play. Moving on to a very new game, The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. I tested this at 1440p high with 100% resolution scale, and while I only tested a few sections at the beginning of the game, what I saw was around a 70 FPS average and 1% lows around 60, which looked and felt great. Monster Hunter Wilds was a game that did struggle a bit at 1440p. I tested with the medium preset, which does have upscaling enabled. Doing this resulted in a meager 53 FPS average with 1% lows of 31. This is an amazing performance, but was expected as this game is pretty unoptimized. Finally, in Black Myth Wukong, I tested using the built-in benchmark at 1440p low with 100% resolution scale and saw a 56 FPS average with 1% lows of 46, so native 1440p in Black Myth Wukong is playable, but to get above 60 FPS, you'll probably have to enable upscaling. Overall performance on the system is solid in my opinion. Most games are going to run great at 1440p if you're willing to play around with the settings. In terms of temps while gaming, the GPU usually stayed between the low 60s and low 70s. In terms of CPU temps, I didn't realize it until now, but I forgot to enable the temps in the overlay, so I don't know exactly what they were while gaming, but under a full load running Cinebench, the CPU maxed out at around 75 degrees, which is very good. All in all, for around $1,000 I think this is a solid machine for 1440p with a good upgrade path in the future. With that being said, there are a ton of ways you could have went with this budget, so if you would have picked different parts, let me know what you would have went with in the comments below. Like I said before, it may be worth it to wait and see if you can snag a 9060 XT for MSRP, but after the 9070 launch, I'm not the most confident in being able to grab one online, especially at MSRP. So yeah guys, I think it's time to wrap this video up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more PC and tech related content in the future. And as always, this is Matt from Tech by Matt, signing out.